We're walking up here, the path from Yad Vashem on one side of Har HaZikaron, the Mount of the Memorial, to the other part of the mountain known as Har Herzl. The path is known as Shvil HaMechaber, the path that connects between these two chapters of Jewish history. And for Jews who lived in the 1930s and 1940s, they were witness not to one groundbreaking moment in Jewish history, but to two. So many of those who managed to survive looked to come to only one place, and that was to Eretz Yisrael, to what was then Palestine, in order to start to rebuild their lives. Some of those who arrived were the last remaining member of their family. They had lost absolutely everybody. In Hebrew, these people are known as Netzer Acharon, the final branch, the last part of a family. And as they approached the land of Israel, often having to battle against the British in order to be here, but once they were here in the land of Israel, there was a certain phenomenal joy. What was it to be a Jew returning to their land after 2,000 years of exile, and how much more so after the destruction that they'd then seen in Europe? But what was lacking for these people was that there was no one to share it with. There was no one to share that joy with, because every single member of their family had been lost. And as we move up from Yad Vashem, the story of the Shoah, to the story of Har Herzl, to the story of the establishment of the State of Israel, you understand what a phenomenal part of the story these people who were Netzer Acharon played in the establishment of the State of Israel. On the eve of independence, 1/3 of the Jews living in what was then Palestine were Holocaust survivors. People who carried with them so much emotional damage and baggage, and they were brought here and they arrived here, and one of the first things they needed to do was to fight for their existence. There was a young Jew called Yaakov Koifman. I'll carry on and then we'll just cut that bit. There was a young Jew called Zalman Koifman who arrived here in 1945, the last member of his family. A year later, a girl called Esther Dreisiger arrived. She also was the last member of her family. In a small settlement called Kfar Etzion, the two of them met and became married. With a whole future ahead of them, both of them responsible for rebuilding the families that they'd lost. On the 13th of May 1948, Zalman and Esther were among the Jews of Kfar Etzion who were overrun by the Jordanians, and both of them were killed, trying to defend their homeland. And it was with that that the second tragedy occurred, a tragedy that had begun in Europe with the destruction of the Nazis, was completed here, as those two families were entirely uprooted from the Jewish people. And we talk about the question of building memory. How do you build memory when there's no one left to remember? And the monument that you see here is the monument to Netzer Acharon, to those people with no one to remember them. And the monument is built in a sense of a house which has fallen over, a house which goes deep inside the mountain here, a house which is no longer the homes that these people came from, but there's a wall missing. And maybe the only comfort that the families would have taken was to know that one member of their family was to survive, that one member of their family was able to start to rebuild, to come to the land of Israel. But as we move around the monument here, you see that a wall can't stand alone. Without the foundations, without the support of the rest of the family, without the support of the rest of the Jewish people, you see that this wall was also to fall. And inscribed upon the stone here, upon the last remaining wall of the house, are the names of some of those last branches of the family. During the course of the War of Independence, 277 Jews lost their lives. What was unique about those Jews in particular was that those 277 were the last remaining members of their families. This monument here, small as it may be, on the path that leads us up into the rest of the story of the establishment of the State of Israel, remembers 277 individuals, but more than that, 277 families, some of them great dynasties which were cut off. And when those people, those last remaining survivors, arrived in Israel, unfortunately the final nail was hammered into the coffin of those families. When we approach a monument like this, we're asked to remember those who have no one to remember them. And it's our engagement, it's our ability to realize that these people, they might not be our immediate family, but they're part of the family of the Jewish people, and we come here in order to remember them and to remember the vastness of the tragedy that befell the Jewish people that didn't end in 1945, a tragedy, unfortunately, that carried on unfolding over the years.